the funny thing is, I don't know if this movie is considered a hugely underrated slasher movie. My perspective has been that the movie actually became what the movie within the movie was, a lost film. It's sort of, and weirdly, in 10 years, to me, it sort of had fallen more and more into obscurity, and the image of Babyface was sort of still there, but the movie was like,
they've lost the context of the movie. And I think that nobody wants their film to be underseen. You know, you can have all the reputation in the world on your project, which is good in a way, and it's cool in a way that this kind of happened to this movie. It's not what you would call a cult film. There's not enough people around to make it a cult yet. But don't not look at it because you think the director got fired, or you think that it got censored to death, or you think none of that stuff really applies. If we accomplished anything close to the kind of thing that we've been babbling about for a couple of hours now, you know, then yeah, you should see it. Dave, how do we meet?
When I was going to USC Film School, I was part of the special effects club, and I set up a screening of Bride of Reanimator, the first American screening of that movie ever, and invited all the effects people down. So you actually came with Greg Nicotero down to the screening, and that's where we met for the first time.
I dimly remember USC.
And then there was a point where I started coming up to your house.
And there was a night where we were having a party at the house, and we went down to the lower patio. I remember this part very well. And we sat around the table on the lower patio at the house saying, you know, we should make a movie someday.
Just the two of us. Yeah. It was just the two of us down on the lower patio.
Faithful last words.
Yeah. There was a point where Fever Dreams, which was the original production company, were coming out to the West Coast to look for directors to do their low-budget productions.
They had done Wicked Lake, right?
That was after.
That was
after. They
okay.
had done a couple films before, and then they were coming out to meet with directors. So they came out and met with me and Robert Burnett, who was one of the producers that I was working with at the time. From there, they ended up choosing us, and our first thing that we told them or asked them was, we'd like to do a pass on the script, and we'd like to have Dave Schow do it for us. I had a problem with the original draft because it was horror fans who were going out to make sort of a spiritual fan film sequel to the original Hills Run Red. And I didn't really, and it was filled with references to real horror movies. And I had learned my lesson from doing my first film not to do that anymore. But I really wanted to stray away from that.
When Dave first looked at the script, another thing that you have to understand about Dave as a director is that at that time, at least, he had this burning desire to create an iconic slasher character, correct?
Yeah. I think the character was the first jumping off point, actually, for me for the whole story, and the look of the character. Because that was something that I could work with an artist named Michael Broom on even before we had a script. So I did that, and that was part of the initial presentation, the look that I gave him. In the original script, it was much more messed up, and it was like, it was too off-putting. It was literally that the killer was wearing a real baby's skinned face. And I was like, to me, I just disconnected. That doesn't work for me.
Well, now if you stitch a couple together, you could.
Yeah, but again, it's like that's already been done, and you're not going to get better than Texas Chainsaw Massacre as far as that concept goes. Now, Mass Killer, as far as a concept, I thought there were ways you could go and take it, and I had the concept of the baby doll mask and the jaw, and the whole idea behind the mask for me was, it started out as the full baby doll thing, but through the years and fighting final girls and everything, the thing had been scratched and broken and everything else, so we just started repairing it with what he had around. And then there was a whole philosophy behind the character of just like, what would take this to the next level? What's better than being able to take off the Leatherface mask? It's like, you can't take off the mask. You are that committed. You're that that dedicated to the blood and guts. And then because Rob Burnett and myself and Dave had all come from doing documentary work on feature films and stuff, we decided to switch it into that so it was more relatable to us. And then we could be unencumbered with the baggage of talking about real horror cinema, and we just worked on crafting our own world within where this movie took place in.
One thing that I've always been fascinated with is stories about lost books, lost films, and the top of Mount Everest in this category is a novel written by Theodore Roszak called Flicker, which is about one guy's obsessive search to find a long disappeared movie director. And it gives you an element of mystery that's not a jump scare plot. But you can't write a movie like The Hills Run Red without having, by being completely ignorant of what the genre's like. And there's a huge slasher element in it, so sure.
But what I'm curious, and I think I'm right, it's like the director wasn't in the original script. Kincannon was not in the original script, that was your creation.
The director was referenced in the original version, but I don't think you ever saw him. And I said, no, it's like you don't talk about this guy and not show him, because the whole movie is a quest to get to him. And then when he gets to him, he's completely not what you wanted, you know, as an icon, as somebody that would impel you to take a quest. The whole idea behind The Hills Run Red for the main character, who we have to present to you convincingly as a film obsessive, is it's like, oh man, it's like I would kill to see that movie. And we go, but would you die to see that movie?
You and I both know you didn't come here for my life story, did you? You came here to see my film. And I'm wondering just what you would do to actually see it.
Doing the script and working together on it was for me, it was a really enjoyable, fun process. The thing was, we'd be sitting there at 3, 4 in the morning, and we'd come up with this stuff, and we'd sit there and laugh.
And we'd try to outdo each other. You know, it's like, yeah, but then...
And it's hard to outdo. I mean, he always jumped over the fence.
Yes.
I climbed, I got on top, but he just vaulted over at times.
I pushed him off to the other side with the spikes.
And I was just sort of like, okay, until someone says no, you know.
Yeah, and that's the purest part of the process, because you get that written down at that time and nobody's telling you no. That comes later.
One of the things early on, before Warner Brothers got involved in the picture, and it was still Fever Dreams, is that they asked Rob Burnett and I to come up with a sales teaser, sort of a proof of concept thing. It was really a veiled director's test to see if I could actually do what I said that I could pull off and do. So they gave us a little money. We rented the Vine Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. The concept was a woman who has been captured by Babyface. She is tied to one of the chairs in a theater full of victims that this killer has killed. Very simple. And then he shows up, stalks down the aisle of the theater to kill her. Film breaks title. It was really just sort of a mood piece. And we shot it in one day. It was really fun. We had a lot of guests and friends of ours.
A lot of cameos, yeah.
You know, show up, you know, to do it and get in makeup and have blood slapped on them and be dead people and everything else. And that was really great, and it turned out to be a really effective piece. So when we got the call to go into Warner Premiere and pitch this project, after finding out that Warner Premiere was a company that was making these direct-to-video movies and everything, we brought his script, and then we brought this teaser. And the combo of both really sold. When we met at Warner Brothers, we met at Warner Premiere and the people there, and we showed them our teaser trailer and then gave them the script, I walked away saying, they're never going to make this movie. It's way too nasty for a studio. So no one was more surprised when they said, yeah, we want to put this on our slate and make this.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I think it takes a certain amount of crazy to show the world who they are. Otherwise, you're just bullshitting them.
The only person that we had cast and knew right away was William Sadler. He was my first choice. He was really the only choice that I wanted, and knowing we had a probably good shot at getting him because of his relationship with past Joel Silver films, and that we thought, well, if Joel's used him several times, he must like him, so that's going to be an easy win. So he was already we didn't have to really cast the Concannon role. That was already sort of a done deal. It was just a matter of closing the deal.
And if you can put Bill's face on Concannon while you're working on the script, you can adjust that character for Bill.
He's an actor who just is game for anything. He's fearless and he likes to play.
You got to have the ability of somebody like Bill to take that raw material that he's presented in the script and create a character out of it.
His approach, and I talked to him a little bit, was like, you're an evangelical priest of cinema. And that's sort of what I told him.
So you gotta suck the audience in. You gotta make them part of the drama, make them believe what they're seeing. You gotta dream for them.
He really was someone you just sort of let go. You know, you unchain him and just see what he brings you, because it's always going to be a surprise.
It's true to this day.
You know what? I bet that slick film school shit works on a lot of people. It ain't gonna work on me.
Tad Hilgenbrink was the studio's choice, and so was Sophie Monk. I was really unfamiliar with either one of them until I had heard they had been cast. And that's the thing, people go, well, why would you cast this person or that person? They're not right for the role. How is Tad Hilgenbrink a horror fan? Look at him, he's so clean cut and everything else. It was like,
what was the justification for a studio saying, it's like, well, we want that guy? Now,
well,
Tad did a terrific job. There's nothing wrong with Tad's work. But they say, we want that one. Why?
I think because they already had a relationship with him from doing Lost Boys 2.
That makes sense.
So it was one of those things where it's like, oh, we had a good experience. We like this guy. He's charming. I think the mistake that I made or didn't pay close enough attention to at the time with the Tyler character and with Tad is he was too coiffed. He was too styled and dressed, and I should have grunged him up more.
I get more of the feeling Tad's an obsessive movie fan than an obsessive horror fan.
Right, exactly. So, but again, I think he really stepped up and really worked hard doing the role.
Where are my friends?
You didn't come all this way just to ask me that, did you?
She said you were dead.
You got to know where you can give in order to get on the other side. And if you're lucky with certain pieces of casting, like Sophie, for example, I think came through with flying colors that nobody would have expected her to do from the kind of roles that she had had before. And she apparently, at least at the time, really jumped into it.
Well, that's the thing. She did.
But the truth is, you didn't know shit, and you didn't suspect shit, because I am that good.
It was probably the meatiest role that she had, and it was a really, really challenging, tough part to pull off. And what was surprising was that from looking at her, you can assume one thing about Sophie's personality in real life, but she was totally committed. She was very enthusiastic. She never complained.
I did it all. Cameras, acting, makeup. Now you tell me, was I committed or what?
So it always strikes me weird now that she has sort of denounced the movie and the part.
Let me tell you one thing about horror films, because of what Dave's talking about. This has happened to me more than once. I have worked on a film that has been denounced by one actor or another. And the reason is not because it's a bad film, not because they didn't like their performance, but because horror films have been ghettoized from day one. It's like slumming. to make a horror film, even to this day, even with a high-profile horror film, to this day. And strangely enough, in the case of The Hills Run Red, which is only a decade old, as opposed to the other movie I'm talking about, which is 25, 30 years old, the actors, when the actors get older, they reverse themselves. They go, it wasn't that bad.
Nobody cares about that subtextual shit! Get to the kill!
The only thing that I wish that I had had the sharpness of adding when we were shooting it was looking at Tyler going, you really think you can, get off heroin in, 3 fucking days?
Yeah.
You moron.
Yeah, that was my bone to pick too, because
I should have been smart enough, and I wasn't.
I went
but I should have added.
I went too fast, and a lot of people complained about the forced withdrawal scene. The whole idea of that scene is that Tyler is a film fanatic. We're seeing this weeks-long process done as a montage, and that was a little too film nerd to fit the movie because, well, she got off heroin in 5.5 hours.
Right. I mean, that's the way, and that's the way it plays. But that, but the thing is too.
You could have fixed it with a line.
But
yeah. This is not to place blame. Who knows whose fault it was? It could be just one of those fall between a filing cabinet accidents.
Sometimes that's the nature of it. And when you're an unproven director for a studio, you get handed certain people. Now, Alex Wyndham and Janet Montgomery were picks that I chose, that Eric Olson had auditioned when he was in London. So looking at the tapes that he sent me, I chose those two.
Alex was a revelation.
I like him. Alex was great.
Like my mom used to say, 暴碌之語與我手.
Look, dude, you're gonna do this because you. Sorry. Fucking A. What the hell was that? Your mom's a very smart woman. And look, you're gonna do this.
And we even talked. There was a point where Tad and Alex came to me right before we were going to shoot and said, "You know what we should do? We should swap roles."
Yeah,
and that would have been. And they were right, but there was no way that was going to happen. Janet Montgomery did a great job, and she was really committed, and she was a great actress to work with. She went through a lot of hell as far as being bloodied and uncomfortable, and I really had to gain their trust, and they knew that I was new. The only way I could really do that was my enthusiasm and my knowledge of the world that we were diving into. So it really became one of these things where they had to put their trust in me as much as they could. Well, the edict when I began making this movie, like right before we started shooting, I spoke with one of the producers at Warner Premiere, and I was concerned about certain things in the script.
What are you doing? Well, mount up.
So I asked him, I said, "How far do you want me to go?" And he replied with, "Go all the way."
Time for your close-up, baby.
He goes, "It's going to be unrated. Don't worry about it. Just, push it, push it, push it." And I said, remember you said this, because I'm not going to dip my toe in the water. I'm going to dive right in. So that's what we did. We were under the impression through the entire making of the movie that this was going to be unrated. It was never, ever going to have to get an R rating.
But during that period of buying discs and tapes, that was greatly to be desired, as many different versions as possible. It was a holy grail thing. It was a quest thing for fans to get different versions.
So as far as the effects go, when we approached that, it was to be as graphic and as nasty and as realistic as we could be. But there was a certain point in doing the effects where I was sort of stuck. The effects just didn't work. Some aspect of it either wasn't ready when we were on set, or it was going to take too much time. So we had to defer to having certain things be visual. What we had storyboarded for the tree scene and the girl getting split and that whole thing, which I really enjoy that scene, and I really like the editing. The only part of it that I don't like is the final wide split, because it's digital effects and they just aren't up to snuff. What I will say about the makeup effects and everything, look, I love the look of Babyface. I think the sculpt and the mask and everything, and what his face looks underneath, I think that's absolutely beautiful work. And it was a blast doing that stuff and having all this stuff on set. One of the really fun aspects of doing this was actually doing the movie within the movie, and that was something that I had to work with the director of photography and sort of teach him the language of early 80s slasher movies and those shots and everything, and the lighting. And the thing is, because every now and then we were shooting little bits and pieces for the movie within the movie, we would just grab a crew member and we would, kill them off for, here, grab a chainsaw, boom, there, I'm gonna squirt blood on you, do this, it was, in a lot of ways this was very fast, dirty filmmaking mixed in with sort of studio filmmaking. So it was very chaotic in that sense, but I think in some ways in a good way, and we came up with some really interesting, fun things that were just on the spot. There's not a point where you're making this movie where you're just
You're dunking your actors in a barrel full of blood. It's
you're
like
just fucking going
try
to
to have
these,
a sense of humor about this.
these depths of depravity for the characters and everything that just ultimately just become absurd. It's just ridiculous what you're asking these actors sometimes to do. I was just happy to be making this movie so much and having the support of the actors, and that it was just, it became infectious.
Don't you fucking dare bullshit me. Don't you fucking bullshit me! You didn't come here for my history. You didn't come here for my life story, did you? You came to see my film. No, I'm just wondering, what would you actually do to get a chance to see it?
Cut. So it comes time to show the Warner Premiere executives the quote-unquote director's cut of this movie. And we were all pretty excited and proud of it. I mean, we knew it was pretty depraved and pushing some buttons, but again, we were still under the understanding that this
that was our job.
And it was under the understanding that it was still going to be an unrated film.
Yeah.
And I remember this vividly. Eric calls and goes, they think it's the most offensive movie that they have ever seen in their lives. So congratulations, you did your job really well. Now they're gonna cut your balls.
All of the things that Dave is talking about are vast catalog of incest and rape, and I don't know if we had cannibalism in there or not, but anyway, that stuff is all in the script. If you're gonna have this adverse reaction to it, don't shoot it.
I also said to him, I said, well, I told you what I was gonna do. You said go dark. And they
We
responded,
didn't think you'd actually do it.
Not that dark. So it became this battle in a way, with a lot of people coming out of the woodwork to chime in their opinion about what should be changed with the movie, as if now we have a problem movie. Because of that, rumors started flying around that I had been fired off the film, that I had been locked out of the editing room, which I was never locked out of the editing room. They let me know what was going on the entire time, even though I wasn't there. And then I came in after that couple weeks and saw the cut that was pretty much what is now released. It was the subject matter within the scenes that they didn't like. I kind of understand it. Today's climate, I don't think any of it would fly. Will we ever see it? It's not like, oh, well, it should never be seen because it could damage you.
That's part of the meta plot,
Right.
Right. You know.
But bottom line is, I think there's a couple things that have made more of a mountain out of a molehill as far as this excise footage. One was the warning sticker on the R-rated DVD case that they put on all the release saying, warning, even though this movie's rated R, blah, 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 blah. And it was just like, okay. But I think personally, I think a lot of it's been magnified and exaggerated as far as like, you just hear, 10 minutes have been cut out. And I don't know how worthwhile that stuff is. I'd have to see it.
I don't think the absence of that footage cripples the movie or makes it substandard in any kind of way. You can see it with or without. It might be a revelation for people to know what's fitting in that little slot, but you had to fill that slot in editing.
Well, I do remember the one thing about the trims and stuff is a lot of that stuff, a lot of those cuts were to the first half of the movie before Babyface actually shows up. So, which was to keep the horror ratcheted and intact through that opening, which is why I think now that before Babyface shows up, that some of it feels a little long, where we had these really shocking things and we were throwing them at you during their traveling out to the woods, and I think that made it.
Yeah.
It kept your. I think it kept your attention maybe a little more than it does now, when it's just sort of random flash cuts to go from one scene to the next.
And maybe it's my fault, too, because when we were working on Leatherface, it's like we had the studio executives at the first screening of Leatherface, turn around and say, we cannot release this movie. I wrote the episode of Freddy's Nightmares that had 8 minutes cut out of it for sex, for TV. So this is like...
It's a pattern.
I have a legendary tradition of cursed films. Yeah.
I think the nature of us not having the ability to have you there on set and massage some of that opening material, a little bit more.
We might have come up with something that was infinitely sicker, but it was R acceptable.
Right.
Four friends are searching for a horror film that's been missing for 20 years.
It's interesting to ask the question of where this stands in the pantheon, because what are you comparing it against to a bunch of franchise movies that have 4, 5, 6, 7 hours worth to look at?
It's strange now to even think that this movie
stands anywhere.
Was just a standalone as a movie, because everyone was so busy looking for those sort of IP properties and those characters that they could exploit and continue to spin off and spin off and spin off. Obviously, I think it's great that the movie's coming out and getting the second chance. I don't know if it's going to, I don't think it will change people's perception. I think it will just be able to introduce people who haven't or weren't aware of the movie an opportunity to go, oh, hey, that's not...
Operators are standing by.
That was pretty good. I'm sorry I missed that at the time. Or, it's like, again, if it just continues to build the myth of Babyface as a character, that's a great thing too.
Time has to pass, and you may have an opportunity to get something, not just this film, but anything. You have an opportunity to get something where you just, for one reason or another, passed it up before. Getting another shot at that for a set of idle eyes to kind of fall on this thing, that's always a good thing.
People go, is there going to be Hills Run 2? I go, well, no, because Warner Brothers isn't interested. The company that made it, Warner Premiere, is now something called something else. All these things, and part of me is like, sometimes one's enough. Sometimes one is good, but let's create something else.
We have an opportunity to go out into the world and be even more wrong.